The hiddenness of God as evidence for God. If God would give undeniable evidence for his existence, it would be a contradiction in terms of who he is. Why is that? The answer lies in free will and love. The materialist often asks for evidence for the existence of God. The request and arguments rooted in a materialistic worldview. Thus, a request for scientific evidence. In materialism, it is often stated that scientific knowledge is the only true knowledge and reliable knowledge. The request would imply the evidence to be of a material nature, in other words, demonstrative nature, that is verifiable, testable, repeatable evidence. However, this is a deeply flawed and serious category mistake. In this talk, I will address this form of evidence specifically, though there are numerous other kinds of reliable evidence. I will argue and demonstrate that free will and love are immaterial properties, and that free will and the freedom to choose to love imply that God exists. That is, if the Judeo-Christian God exists indeed. If he would reveal himself fully as he is portrayed in the Judeo-Christian scriptures, the Bible, and it is true, one will be totally overwhelmed by who he is. So much so that we will not have the freedom to choose to love him or believe in him. A contradiction in terms of who he is. God has to be hidden to allow freedom to choose to love him. Yet he reveals enough of himself to those who seek him to be convinced of his existence, but he hides enough of himself to those who do not want to be convinced, those who do not want God to exist. In the following talk, I will give my reasons and arguments as to why I say this. Welcome to my 15th video in the series, A Time to Think. I'm Tertius Venter, a reconstructive plastic surgeon with a zeal for God and a zeal for why it is rational to believe. Should you want to know more about my activities as a volunteer surgeon, a Christian apologetic, you can visit my websites, my personal website tertius26.org and my apologetic website talktalk.nl. The links to these websites are below this video in the subscription. Also the link to my blog for the text of this video. What is love? Can love ever be forced? No, love per definition is free. Forced love is a contradiction in terms. If you are not free to choose to love, it can never be love. For the strict materialist, free will is only an illusion, and I quote Sam Harris, "Free will is an illusion so convincing that people simply refuse to believe that we do not have it." And rightly so, because if we are but material, that is, molecules in motion, electrochemical processes in and between cells, if there is nothing transcendent that exists and we are nothing more than material particles reacting to the laws of nature, free will is impossible, and love can only be an illusion. If everything that exists can be examined and empirically proven, given enough time and the necessary knowledge, and nothing immaterial exists, free will and love cannot be real. Physical objects behave by natural laws and inputs, and free will and love can only be an illusion. Yet we experience love as real. Love for a spouse, for your child, for parents. Can all of this be just a mere illusion? An illusion so strong that we believe we have it but do not really have it. Are we and everyone ever born into this world at all times being deceived in believing that love is real? Can it be possible that we are being deceived by a material world that we live in and are part of? Think carefully. Do we not experience free will as real and love as real? Or is our world just a dishonest joke? The alternative is that there is more than the material world, and that love and free will is a reality and not a mere delusional product of the material brain. Sam Harris writes that if he were to trade places with a particular individual, say a criminal, atom for atom, he would be that criminal. There would be no extra part of him that could decide to see the world differently or to resist the impulse to victimize other people. And I quote him, "I cannot take credit for the fact that I do not have the soul of a psychopath," close quote. If he was truly in the shoes of a criminal, that is, if he had the genes and life experience and identical brain and an identical state as that criminal, he and by implication each one of us would act exactly the same. I totally agree with Sam Harris if there is only a material world and nothing more. But I put it to you that we have a free will and we are free to choose to love more than just our family or the people important to us. We can also choose to love those who hate us. Enemies that might threaten our survival, we might choose to love them with zero benefit to us and to our own people. It is a choice that we can take freely. There is nothing in this notion beneficial to survival of the species, not to our particular people group or even to our personal selves. In fact, it might cost us dearly, but we do have a choice. We are free to choose to love even those who hate us. In the world of the strict materialist, there is no free will. The love of the mother for a child is not a free choice, but a necessity for the survival of the species. Even so, the love amongst people. Free love does not exist as a reality. It is not a choice in the world of the materialist. So, is the materialist then trapped in the world of materialism? I would think so. If there is no transcendent being, no God, he or she is trapped. And with this, all morality, all moral responsibility falls flat. One would lock up a criminal not because he's done anything wrong. He had no choice, he had no free will after all, but to protect society against him. If there is no God, then morality and law lose their foundation and there is no objective good and evil. This was acknowledged by Nietzsche, Stirner, Rousseau, Sartre, Camus, Dostoevsky, and many others. This is not the reality that we experience in life, nor what humans live out. It is not coherent with life, and we know it. We encounter free choices throughout our lives daily, and very importantly, we are responsible for our decisions. We experience love, free to love even our enemies, a decision that has nothing to do with the survival of the species, but with profound transcendent significance. Caught in this box of materialism, caught in the box where no transcendence exists, where no God exists, free will and love cannot exist and cannot have any true meaning. Free choices require that man is more than just a body, that there is more to reality than just the physical world. If more than the material world does exist, if transcendence, if God does exist, free will and true love can exist. This would add one more argument to the collective evidence for the existence of God in the larger palette of reasons to believe and one less reason not to believe. So we experience free will and true love as real. Materialism is incoherent and not in line with reality, lest you as a materialist are willing to accept that free will and love are just deceitful illusions. And a question then, is certainty in life not knowing that truth aligns with reality? We might ask then that if God exists, why is it not obvious to everyone? After all, The Judeo-Christian concept of God is that He is love, that He is the very essence of what love is. Love is not described as an attribute of God, but that love is what He is, and that He is the sole source of love. Why can't we experience and see Him? Why not definitive evidence for His existence? And we can know that He is a reality. Why His hiddenness? Why do some people see God in everything and others see Him in nothing? Blaise Pascal wrote, "What can be seen on earth indicates neither the total absence nor the manifest presence of the divinity, but the presence of a hidden God. Everything bears that stamp." I'd like to put to you two reasons for God's hiddenness. Firstly, God reveals Himself to those who seek Him with all their hearts, and hide Him from those who shun Him with all their hearts. And secondly, if God would give undeniable evidence for His existence, it would be a contradiction in terms of who He is, of what free will and love is. So let's look at the two reasons in a bit more detail. Firstly, if God had wished to overcome the obstinacy of the most hardened, He could have done so by revealing Himself to them plainly, and they could not doubt the truth of His essence. This is not the way that He wished to appear when He came in mildness, because so many men had shown themselves unworthy of His clemency, that He wished to deprive them of the good they did not desire. It was therefore not right that He should appear in a manner divine and absolutely capable of convincing all men. But neither was it right that His coming should be so hidden that He could not be recognized by those who sincerely sought after Him. He wished to make Him perfectly recognizable to them, thus wishing to appear only to those who seek Him with all their hearts, and hidden from those who shun Him with all their hearts. He has qualified our knowledge of Him by giving signs which can be seen by those who seek Him and not by those who do not. There is enough light for those who desire only to see, and enough darkness for those of contrary disposition. Pascal. Nietzsche in 1881 in Daybreak finds the notion of a hidden God inconsistent with a God who holds us accountable for our unbelief. And I quote him, "A God who is all-knowing and all-powerful, who does not even make sure that His creatures understand His intention, could that be a God of goodness?" Close quote. But Nietzsche's objection labor under a false assumption, namely, for God to be good and omnipotent, He must reveal Himself so clearly as to leave no doubt for all humans, irrespective of their moral condition and attentiveness, according to Douglas Groothuis. But Pascal argues that God is available to those who seek Him, and God has left enough clues to make the search warranted. Certain qualities or virtues best suit a person for gaining knowledge are patience, tenacity, humility, studiousness, and honest truth-seeking. Blaise Pascal, he has willed to make himself appear openly to those who seek him with all their heart, and to be hidden from those who flee from him with all their heart. He so regulates the knowledge of himself that he has given signs of himself visible to those who seek him and not to those who seek him not. This allows for free will, the choice to seek, to love, to believe. God will not coerce us into a loving relationship with him. And the second reason for God's hiddenness, if God would give us all the evidence, undeniable evidence for his existence, we will be left with no choice but to love him. And it will not be love, as we will have no choice. This is contrary to what love is. God created us to love him, but also gave us a free choice to love him or not. If the Judeo-Christian God exists and would fully reveal himself as revealed in the Bible, mortal man will have no choice but to love him. God reveals enough of himself in the word of Scripture, the Bible, and the word of nature, science, and on a personal level, to know that he exists and that we can live in a loving relationship with him based on trust. And we can experience more evidence of his existence by seeing his action in our lives and developing thereby a deeper trust in him daily. Yet he hides enough of himself for us not to be overwhelmed by the fullness of his being. He leaves us with a choice daily to love him and to trust him or not. If the Judeo-Christian God exists and what is written about him is true, then 1. We would be so overwhelmed by his goodness, overwhelmed by his love and presence, more than we can ever imagine, or ever encounter in our experiences in human relationships. We would experience peace beyond imagination and contentment that only a fool would walk away from. The majority of Christians experience this in different degrees at different times of their lives, in their relationship with God, and experience these, but not all the time in the full intensities as it might be possible. We would secondly realize and understand the purpose of the universe, the purpose for our own existence, and not to choose him would not make any sense. We will believe the scriptures, the Bible, and know that it is true, that we are sinful, that God is holy and righteous, the perfect, righteous judge that will punish every sin we ever committed, lest in his love our sin is covered by Christ on the cross, and we will eventually be taken up into his presence. And if not, if we choose not to love him, he will respect our free choice, and we will experience what our guilt earned, now and eternal torment. And this torment means existing with a permanent feeling of guilt, of regret, of experiencing nothing of the goodness of God. In other words, no beauty, no friendship, no love, no light, no warmth, or anything that is good. Only a fool would choose the latter, nobody in his right mind, if he know this is completely true. To grasp and realize this to its full extent, without a shred of the slightest doubt, and to experience the abundance of God in his full grandeur will leave us with no choice, and love will not be free and therefore cannot be love. I see as a trait of God is, he always gives us plausible deniability. Every time he makes himself known, he always says, if you do not want to believe me, you don't have to. It is your choice. If you don't want to think this is a handout I'm showing you, you don't have to. But if you are willing to accept that it's me, we're going to have a great time together. A quote by an American research astronomer and physicist. Without undeniable conclusive evidence for his existence, he leaves it open to us to believe him or not to believe him. He would not bully us, coerce us, or force us. He desires true love, completely free choice. The hiddenness of God and the lack of final evidence for his existence are enveloped in the reality of the existence of the transcendent, of the reality of love and free will, and these cannot be separated. It makes sense that he will not give us the final definitive evidence for his existence. He wants us to freely choose him, a passion to seek him and find him. If we are merely physical material stuff, then there is no God, no free will, no love, no objective morality, and very little sense in this world. Love and free will then just an illusion. People will forever argue for and against God's existence. depending on what their heart's desire is. The final conclusion will forever escape their minds, the minds of the materialist, because of free will and love. If God would give undeniable evidence for his existence, it would be a contradiction in terms. He is love and created us for love. Love is free, and definitive, undeniable evidence for his existence would remove our free will to choose to love him. Not being able to choose to love him is a contradiction. The atheist wants God to be material-like, like the ancient Israelites and other ancient civilizations that kept on making physical gods, idols, or the Greek god Zeus. This has been natural to the human race throughout the ages and still is. Our idols are now mostly one of three physical entities, if not all three: money, power, that is power over our fellow humans, and sex. Scientists cannot even try to prove or disprove God's existence because they know that there is no experiment that can ever detect God. You cannot use material means to prove the immaterial. How do you prove the existence of mathematics that you cannot hold in your hand or demonstrate under a microscope? You can claim the existence of mathematics, invent a mathematical language to describe it, to make it useful, and present evidence to prove that mathematics is true and exists. But the essence of mathematics has always existed since the Big Bang. The cosmos is based on mathematics. We as humans can only discover it, invent a language to make it useful, and find ways to describe it with our rational brains. If the universe disappears tomorrow, eternal mathematical truths would still exist. The book of nature is written in the language of mathematics, Galileo. You cannot demonstrate mathematics physically, but one can see the reality of mathematics. Neither can you demonstrate the rationality of the brain in a laboratory, but you can see the effects of it. It is a serious category mistake to try and prove the immaterial by material means. The atheist always asks for evidence, physical evidence, verifiable, testable, repeatable evidence for the existence of God. This is a deeply flawed category mistake. God is immaterial, and to cling to this demand for this type of evidence is just an excuse not to face reality and to avoid the truth. I find that atheists very often focus on the next possible objection in an argument for the existence of God, and they do not seriously think about and consider the arguments that have been put to them, and they miss so much of the strong evidence, the collective evidence and arguments for the existence of God. If the knowledge of God is available to everyone, Romans 1:18-21, and if the case for Christianity is strong for those who want to investigate, then everyone is accountable for what they know and could know about God. Much of atheism is understood as misotheism, that is, the hatred of God that they know is there, often from previous painful experiences. Atheists like Freud assume there is no God and then wreck their brains to explain why so many believe this egregious, glaring falsehood. The atheist or skeptic, having been exposed to general revelation sufficient to know there is a God, develops a false belief that God does not exist, since if God existed, one would need to humble oneself, be thankful, and worship God. Pride forbids this, and pride or autonomy is the essence of all sins. Pascal wrote, "Men despise religion and hope that it's not true. In one sense, Christianity is the easiest of all religions. You believe the gospel and are redeemed. It is all a question of grace. In another sense, it's the hardest of all religions because you must repent of any self-righteousness and humble yourself before the cross. If God is there, one should be humble and worship him. But resisting this requires self-deception. Suppressing of the truth is intentional, by not considering the cumulative truth of the existence of God seriously, yet seriously pursuing every possible counter-argument to find reasons not to believe, which God will allow as you turn your back on Him. It is a free choice. Often it is we that are hiding from God and not God hiding from us. In summary then, free will is inconsistent with materialism. Free will is a necessity for the existence of love. Love is inconsistent with materialism. Free will and love are consistent with reality and consistent with the immaterial, with the transcendent, consistent with the existence of God, not proof that God exists, but consistent with His existence. If God is love and exists, why does God not show Himself clearly? First, as I have argued, God gives enough evidence of His existence for those who seek Him, but does not reveal enough of Himself to those who do not want to know Him. Only one version of each of the cosmological, design, moral arguments on a religious experience, the ontological arguments need to be sound as convincing items of knowledge that theism is true. On the historical arguments, the reliability of the New Testament manuscripts and the resurrection of Christ by itself is good reason to believe that there is a God and that Jesus is who the New Testament claims He is. And I have made videos on each of these topics. The atheist will constantly attempt to poke holes in each of these arguments, but none can be finally overturned, nor act as final evidence for God, and that is important to notice. There is enough evidence for His existence and enough counter-arguments for doubt, and that is exactly where God leaves us, and leaves it up to the individual to freely choose to love Him. Secondly, should He reveal Himself fully, one would be so overwhelmed by who He is that one will have no choice but to love Him. Thus God puts us in a position to choose freely and truly love Him, and not for man to be overwhelmed and leave Him without a choice. If we would have no choice, there can be no love and no loving God. God leaves us with enough doubt and enough confirmation to freely choose to love Him. It would be a contradiction if God is love and gives us so much evidence not to question His existence in any sense, and thereby have no choice but to love Him. Therefore, any final evidence or definitive evidence for God by whatever means would be a contradiction in terms of who God is. Furthermore, to demand physical evidence to prove God's existence is a category mistake, as I have pointed out, and a mere excuse for the materialist to hide behind and be under the illusion to think that he's got God in checkmate. The hiddenness of God points to the evidence for God. God can be found by everyone who sincerely want to find Him. It is a matter of the will. It is not that man cannot believe, but will not. If you found what was argued here useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It will hugely help to spread the message that it is rational to believe in God and that Christianity is true. Thank you.